All right, the defense can continue with its cross of this witness.
Okay, Detective Frerer, yesterday we were talking about you collected the evidence, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so what all evidence did you collect yourself?
The projectiles from a bullet.
Is there any other evidence that you collected?
At the scene or?
Yes, at the scene.
Yes, just the projectile.
Okay. And then, was there a cigarette collected at the scene, is that correct?
I don't recall that.
Okay.
I did not impound that.
You never saw it?
I don't recall it.
Okay. And you had collected the items that were in the Ford F-150, is that correct?
Yes.
And you collected the earplugs that were in the truck?
Yes.
And you stated that those were common among people who frequent a shooting range, is that correct?
Yes.
And during the course of your investigation, did you learn that Alex Cox frequently visited shooting ranges?
No.
Okay. You mentioned that you remembered Alex Cox's vehicle license plate because it was personalized, is that correct?
That is correct.
And then in the course of your investigation, did you discover what his license plate stood for?
No.
Okay. Or what it was a reference to?
I do not know.
Okay. Did you learn in the course of your investigation that Alex did stand-up comedy?
No.
Okay. We talked about the hole in the Tesla, is that correct?
Yes.
And you said it was consistent with a bullet hole, is that correct?
Yes.
And so that could be a bullet from a rifle or a handgun?
Yes.
Okay. So either one.
Either one.
And those fragments weren't tested to find out if that was from a bullet or, I mean, the bullet was from a rifle or a handgun?
I did not send it for testing.
Okay. You also said that you were the one that canvassed the neighborhood for videos?
One of many.
Okay. But in your report, you said that at 3854 Phelps, that the individual had heard a loud bang but did not investigate it, said it didn't sound like a gunshot. Is that correct?
I object to hearsay.
Sustained.
And you had stated that you did collect the fragments, is that correct?
Objection asked and answered.
But the majority of the bullet was never located, is
Let
that
me
correct?
rule on the
Oh, sorry.
objection. It's sustained. Next question.
And the majority of the bullet was never located, is that correct?
We had a projectile. That's what we found, just pieces of it,
Okay.
fragments.
And you had put in your report that you believed it had fallen out during when the victim drove away?
It's possibility. There's a lot of possibilities.
So my question is, how would it have fallen out how could you explain it falling out? Could you explain that to me?
It depends where the bullet hole or the projectile goes into a vehicle. There's several, a vehicle is not sealed, all sealed up so there's not ever breathing or anything like that. So there's holes in it, and there's ways that, let's say like venting and that type of stuff for a vehicle. So when a vehicle is in motion, it moves, right? It rocks, goes over bumps. That's why they have shock absorbers. So anything that's on top, it's just like when you accidentally leave your coffee on top of your vehicle and you drive off. It's a good chance it's going to fall off. And it's the same as a projectile on a vehicle also.
Okay. So how far down were the fragments that you found into the hole that was made in the Tesla?
It was located by another detective, but it was easy enough for us to retrieve.
So like it
I don't,
inside the hole somewhere.
yes,
But just so I understand, the bullet breaks apart, is that correct?
yes.
And so maybe the majority fell out and those pieces were left inside.
Yeah, I wouldn't know how much of the bullet was taken apart or how much damage that bullet or projectile would have had.
Okay. But some of the pieces could be in there and the majority of it could fall out?
That's a theory, yes.
And it wouldn't be wedged in?
We didn't locate anything that was wedged in.
But that could have been due to just driving around the block because, like you said, the car jostles.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the question.
If the car had not been in motion, then the bullet should have been intact. Is that correct?
No, when a bullet hits, it depends on the type of bullet, frangible or non, the make, the model. If it hits a solid object, bullets have different properties. So some will break apart a little easier than others. Some will go right through. It just depends on the make and the model of the bullets.
Okay. So no testing was done on this bullet to find out what kind of bullet it was?
The projectile.
Correct. I mean, no.
I did not send it for testing.
Okay. Is that something that could be found out?
What do you mean?
What kind of bullet it was from the fragments?
I believe there's a test that possibly does it.
Okay. And you didn't think that was necessary?
I was not the case detective on this.
Okay. So since those bullet fragments were not tested in any way, the markings on there that you had testified to yesterday that were copper were part of the jacket, is that correct?
The coloring,
Yes.
the color, yes.
So that's just from a visual, that's not from any kind of testing of the copper, is that correct?
Right.
Okay, so just looking at
It's
it.
the color.
Okay, that color, copper color, could have been from the Tesla itself?
I didn't see any copper coloring on the outside of that Tesla. It was white in color.
Okay. And then when you said you canvassed the neighborhood, or the Gilbert Police Department canvassed the neighborhood, there was no camera coverage to your knowledge, is that correct?
People I talked to did not have any. I believe there was camera footage found by other detectives or officers, yes.
Oh, there was,
Possibly, yes.
but you did not discover any?
No,
And you have never seen any?
no.
Okay. And have you been working on this case this whole time, or what was your involvement as far as from October 2nd to when you worked on this case?
The original call out I was part of, and then I was requested to execute the search warrant on the Ford F-150. And that was December 23rd.
And that kind of ended your
Yes.
dealings with this case?
Yes.
Okay. So all of the reports that you had written were in between that time frame?
Yes.
Okay. No more questions, Your Honor.
All right, redirect.
Detective, I'm going to start with sort of where we were just ending and go back to some issues from yesterday. In this Tesla, did you note damage to the molding where the window would have gone up into the frame of the Tesla?
Yes.
Can I have the Almo, please? Thank you. So we're looking here, Exhibit 39. So would it be fair to say that there's not a great seal anymore between where the window went up into the frame and the car itself?
That is correct.
And did you also view the glass itself?
Yes.
That was laying on the driveway?
Yes.
And did you also, Exhibit 46, note that little notch or divot in the glass itself?
Yes.
And was that sort of consistent with the location of where the window would have gone up into the frame of the vehicle?
That is correct.
So when you're talking about a seal of a window going up into the frame, does the fact that the molding was broken and that there's a divot in the glass and the glass was completely shattered impact whether or not all those fragments or pieces of that projectile might remain inside the Tesla?
There's a good chance they would fall out of the Tesla.
Because the seal is no longer the same as it once was, right?
Correct.
You were asked yesterday about the length of the bullet hole or the size of this bullet hole. Do you recall that?
Yes.
When you're talking about the A here, were you trying to measure from not just the damage of where the bullet started to impact or cause that concaveness in the frame, but just the actual hole itself?
Yes.
Does that still tell you the size of the bullet?
No.
That's just the damage that it caused as it entered into the frame of this Tesla?
That is correct.
You were asked yesterday about casings and fragments, and can we explain what a casing is, what a projectile is, and what fragments are?
Sure. A casing is what the bullet is contained in. That's where the black powder and the actual bullet itself is attached to. A casing is usually discarded after the bullet is fired out of the gun. And it could be caught, it depends on what kind of weapon there is. Revolvers actually keep the casings in as a circle. Rifles are known could keep the casing inside until you eject it yourself. The semi-automatic weapons which police use and which are more common, they have it's a semi-action. It will eject the casing out. The casing just holds the bullet. Once the bullet is fired from the gun, it comes out very, very hot. We're trying to explain is when it hits a certain item, it just depends on the integrity of the bullet itself. How strong is that bullet? Is it going to be strong enough to go through metal? Usually not. And so once it hits an item, it is compromised. The bullet is compromised and it makes fragments. It falls apart. And that's where the fragments come from, and that's what we found in this Tesla, with just fragments of the actual bullet.
Okay, so when we're talking about the fragments that you recovered, those pieces of the projectile after it broke apart and after it had first gone through or into the Tesla frame, this metal, and then broke apart. That's what you're talking about when you talked about the fragments that you recovered?
That is correct.
Now, the defendant asked you about casings and if you found any at the scene. Do you recall that line of questioning?
I do remember that.
If you were advised that the person firing the rifle was laying or lying in wait inside of the back of a Jeep, that only part of the barrel of that rifle came out the rear window, and then the rifle was fired, where would you expect that casing to land?
More than likely, it would still be inside that vehicle, the Jeep.
Okay, so you would not expect it to fly forward out of the Jeep and land out on the ground?
No.
The defendant asked you about if you saw a casing over by the pool. Would you expect, absent, I guess, a hole in the floor of the Jeep, to find the casing over there if it was still in the Jeep?
No.
So,
Never found the casing next to a pool.
but you wouldn't expect to find a casing over
No.
there, right?
No.
There was no evidence of anyone shooting over there,
Right.
and there would be no reason for a casing to be over there.
Correct.
So in this case, given the information you were given, were you surprised that you didn't find a casing?
No. It doesn't mean we don't look for the casing. We automatically look for the casings. But since it was inside of a vehicle, it's just like a drive-by shooting type of thing. We'll say once we pull the car over, the casings will be inside that vehicle, most likely. Then one or two might pop out if they have the gun outside the window, something like that, the casing might. But usually we searched, there was no casing found in this, so we determined it was more likely than not, inside that vehicle still.
And the casing was in the windowsill? Sorry.
Yeah, the casing was more likely than not inside that vehicle still.
Inside the Jeep still?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I have no other questions for this witness, Your Honor.
Are there any questions from the jury? I don't see any. Sir, you can step down. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor.